original series costuming and props. Dear Lord, that's amazing. So,
give them props.
what's that?
You gotta give them the props.
You gotta give them props for that, exactly. So, you know, our mission statement all along has been to basically build up the community, to support the original series and its themes, and to really just kind of create something that should have been almost created 30 years ago. Giving people a place to go that are the gearheads, that are into the props, that are into the costumes, that are into the model building, things like that. So that's why we wanted to come here and give everyone a chance that's like us, that is completely into all the buttons and are completely always hitting pause and what was that? Okay, what was that? It was different on that paint job there. So with that, I'm going to kind of turn it over to the real experts. I'm going to turn it over. This is Dale. Brian. This is Brian. Okay. This is a problem. I know everyone by their screen names. Everyone knows their real names. So okay. So anyway, if you want to ask any questions about, even if you want to ask what it's like to walk around, if you notice most everyone has a handler run around, how you get started in building something like this, any of the process questions, it's basically turn it over. So, real experts.
I'll give a little bio about myself. My name's Dale Long. I go by on a lot of forums, Gold Cylon. I also own and operate, and with my help here with John Boone, Cylon Knight, he's the admin to the page of byyourcommand.net. It's a Cylon Builders Forum, and it's also Galactica in general, mostly leaning towards the original series with a little bit of the new series talk in there, and 70s sci-fi and sci-fi in general. If someone comes on board, they're a very active member and they like one particular show, if they want to have a thread about that, talk about that also. Also, Andrew Probert will be back here with us. He just needs to take a break. He did his last thing for over an hour and a half. My local sidekick, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm actually an art teacher in California, and I'm one of those guys who looked at those pictures and watched the show and said, I want to make that stuff. And actually, who's familiar with the 501st? Yeah, Star Wars people, you know, you see the stormtroopers walking around, you see Boba Fett and all that, and that's a massive organization of people, and they have this great network of people, artisans who make stuff, people buy stuff, they make it themselves, they do a good job, they do a crappy job, honestly. And so I'm one of those guys who want to make the best I can to make it as faithful to the show as possible. And so actually, this is some of the armor that I've done as accurately as I could to what I had available to me. So there's a lot of steps that go into it, a lot of know-how, a lot of sculpting, vacuum forming. It's all about process of research, getting the correct research, where byyourcommand.net comes into play. Because you've got a lot of people with inside information, and so yeah, that's what we're in the business of, is actually physically producing something that is, you know, really cool and makes you want to, you know, take a picture. And then of course there's the whole logistical thing about wearing the darn thing, you know, and not falling over and keeling it over and being able to see outside of a mask. So it's a big long process, which I'm sure everybody here who has a costume knows that it's not just a matter of going to the Walmart and picking up the costume. It doesn't go that easily. So that's what we're here to answer your questions about.
First of all, anyone out here ever suited up in a complete suit and gone costuming?
I don't want to. This is bad enough.
I'm sweating.
You're on a great vacation.
I know. That's what
Okay.
I'm talking about. I'm
How does
sweating.
it compare with wearing a TK?
I've never worn one.
TK, actually, well, it depends on, I mean, with the costuming community, of course, people do all the modifications to key it into their own body types, right? When I was wearing mine, I was doing crazy stuff in it, you know, and it was actually quite comfortable, and I was happy with it. This thing, what I noticed, it's the undersuit, which is a nightmare. Okay, it's a lot of ribbing, it's a lot of stretchy, hot material. And what I noticed about this, and I'm sure you can address this, Ms. Probert, is about the fact that on this particular costume, the way they made it back in the 70s, everything seems to be floating around and kind of chunky, which on screen looks pretty massive and bulky, but for walking around a convention, it is excruciatingly not simple.
I did that on purpose. I figured if the people wearing the costumes were all pissed off, they were going to act mean to everybody.
You cannot get that information anywhere else except that.
Just the undersuit alone is a nightmare to walk around, let alone putting the armor on, and then basically putting the helmet on, which is almost like a blindfold. With peering down, if you had a blindfold on, peering down, you can see just a little bit. You're seeing a lot more peering through a blindfold, looking down.
And actually I did some modifications to that helmet because I knew I would be walking around a convention. And so what I've actually done is I've taken part of the grill, I took part of the grill out and put some acrylic there. And I also took part of the scanner out, tried to hide it. So for the most part, if I just kind of flash it around, it'll be going, ooh, without thinking about it. But actually I have a lot more visibility, even though I've gone away from the original concept. And that's one thing about costuming that, we were comparing TKs is sometimes you have to stray just a little bit away in order to make it, not fall apart and you not fall.
I have kind of a technical question. As far as the scanner goes, I know the original was a nightmare. I saw some of the circuits, the pictures of the circuits. What do you guys do in our hobby? I mean, I've seen the Jupiter kits out there, but do you guys actually come up with decade counters and piggyback them to get 32 LEDs going
There's
across?
plenty of people out there now that custom build them, design them and build them and sell them. And now they have the advantage of super bright LEDs, which
Right.
they didn't back in the 70s. And so without the super bright LEDs, the eye scanner was not appearing on camera. So they had to switch over to the light bulbs.
Right.
Those light bulbs, stick your head in the oven with those lights going for 20 minutes. The battery belt that is on the Cylon
Yes.
was a cameraman's belt made by G&M Battery Power, which was a fairly common battery for the industry for walking around, filming on location type of stuff for the camera. But it was like a furnace in here. The suit was hot enough, and then you've got this furnace staring you in the eye.
Oh yeah.
And those quality 70s electronics,
Yeah.
nothing could possibly happen.
Yeah,
with
nowadays
the
things are
conventional
cooler. And
photographies.
I was just curious what you guys use, if you use pre-built kits or you actually build your own circuits. And put them
Oddly
there.
enough, this is one of those Jupiter kits,
Is it?
which are nice and bright, but you can't get your head in the helmet. And that's why I did the modification to where I look through the scanner.
Okay.
And that's the only way. That's why I actually have some of the other kits, which you can, but they're expensive.
There still hasn't been a true one manufactured that you can wear, and that is feasibly priced without paying $300 or $400 or $500 for it. There's a handful or two out there that people make the scanners, but they're electronic engineers. They don't have a helmet to work with a face inside, know what to design around. There's one that was made that it had a lot of wires running down from Mohawk here, but he didn't space it correctly. So that you have to wedge it in sideways, and if you're not careful, you might snap the board.
Well, sounds like a project that the Blackstar chief science officer needs to come up with.
Put 'em on it.
Yeah, and speaking of which, it's coming to things like this, talking with people, not even knowing that they exist. Like, I'm sure a lot of people don't know I exist, even though I've spent the last 5 years looking at his original sample and trying to replicate it as best I can. Because for the first time, I'm like the first guy who actually does the backpack as the original was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate vacuum form pools, kind of thrown together to create, this. So, and it's a little bit different than what you see out there because it actually looks like the real thing.
He did sculpt his Cylon. He did not replicate mine.
Yeah, I didn't cast it, which, except for that. You gotta take what you got sometimes.
Any questions?
I have a
Yes.
question.
So, Mr. Probert, when you were designing this, how much thought goes into you've now just come up with this amazing design? How much forethought goes into that portion of it to making how do I replicate this and make it wearable?
That's a really good question. Anyone else? Oh. Well, naturally, I knew that a person had to wear this thing. And so I basically start out with a body and build a suit around it in the design process. But as far as fabricating the pieces, I don't know if you saw my slideshow about that, but I tried to come up with ideas on how those pieces would all fit together, but with that exploded view. But that was just the backpack. So I didn't really take into consideration the chest piece because I just assumed that it would be one piece, pretty much built as designed. Ralph Massey was doing the work on the suit, the prototype, while I was doing some other work on the show. So the only time I really saw the suit was when it was basically had the prototype all vacuum formed together. I thought it looked really good, but so somewhere between my drawing and Ralph's final, they figured out a way to conform the interior cuts to an average body. But that probably doesn't answer your question.
No, that's
So, I mean, something is complicated. Any suit has to, after the concept phase, obviously has to be fitted on somebody. And the closer you can get to the actual wearer, the better it's going to fit. These obviously had to be made to fit a general size stuntman or, other actor of that sort.
Basketball players. I'm 6'4". I was the cutoff on the height requirement if I was to apply for a job as an actor as a Cylon. They wanted 6'8". 6'8" was the average, and 6'4", the short guy stood in the back of the line.
There you go.
There's a story that in the movie, towards the end of Caroline, and the Cylons and the Ovions come in and attack humans, and supposedly they want the Cylons charging in on horses, but because of the limited visibility, they kept falling off and things like that. Did you see any of that? Were you trying to find
No,
ways around that?
to overcome that, they tried to get some Minotaurs to substitute for horses, but I'm sorry, that's a reference to something else. Anyway, no, I hadn't actually heard that. So, interesting. And yeah, I can see how they could probably fall off. Cylons are stupid.
Thank you.
See, originally the Cylons were living creatures that were biologically blind, and so they developed these helmets with scanners to help them navigate. And they were creatures up until the pilot was being filmed, and then they changed them to robots. There's a reason for that. The network says you can only kill so many living things in an hour, but you can kill all the robots you want. So they suddenly say, okay, now they're robots.
wow. Just that easy.
Movie magic. The end.
Anybody else?
When you were going to when you were going to sculpt this, did you have to actually take a body cast yourself, or did you?
Yes and no. Actually, I mean, I had some art pictures. Because it was done for a general human, you could actually get away with not using a complete body cast. I mean, I sculpt figuratively, so I already kind of innately have those kind of parameters in my head. But of course, what happened is as I was starting to do the backpack piece and I wanted to get these L pieces correct, I actually used a casting of my own self, and then this way I used my own shoulders so I could get that bend right. And so, to some degree, yes. But I think that's more specific to if you do a creature suit. That's when it's absolutely necessary to use a body cast. You know, I've done a Batman suit where, you know, it had to be very form-fitting. So, you know, then I did that. And if I did it again, I probably would, because then you would start to really proportion it to a particular human being, though. And if you don't have a set actor, you have to kind of generally say, well, it's got to be a one-size-fits-all, or fits 6'8", you know, type thing. So, but yeah, it's funny, even though, and I have to kind of put this out, people who are interested in this hobby, who want to actually pursue making it themselves, there is a lot of infrastructure that goes into it. Not only do you have to know how to sculpt it, you have to do a lot of research. One thing I can absolutely 100% guarantee you is that as much as I've tried, this is 100% not accurate to the original. Okay, that's the only thing. It looks all right. You know, people look at you, hey, it's a Cylon. But you get all the different manufacturers of Cylon suits standing together, and you'll see drastic differences. But in all essence, they're still Cylons, right? You know, they still have that kind of impact. Unless you're actually casting off of the original, or you are the original, then I doubt you'll ever get to that point.
One thing was that Brian had started sculpting his Cylon before we met. He had not been sculpting it very long, a month or two maybe, before we met. He brought his work over, started comparing it. He saw where he needed to make the adjustments, but he did have a good visual study piece to look at, and a screen use Cylon.
Knowing sources, I mean, it's not a one-person job. Obviously, you have to source out plastic as a hobbyist, and I'm speaking more as a hobbyist than I am as an industry. They do a lot of in-house stuff, and you know, like, how many times do you go and where do you go to get chroming done, or you know, paint job done? I don't know. It took me a while to find a guy who literally was 5 minutes away from me who does this stuff, you know, professionally. So it's not only the matter of just buying stuff off the shelf, it's kind of knowing how to source out, research your resources, and getting to know people. And the best place to do that is to go Blackstar, to go to Buyer Command, and start networking with people who've done it before. Because, you know, then you don't have to make those same mistakes. Or you can see the differences in suits and kind of see what fits your style and your budget and whatnot.
One of the most difficult pieces to replicate is the undersuit. There are people that have been hunting for years trying to find a seamstress that will do it. It's a nightmare. There's like 500 feet of ribbed tubing throughout the entire suit. About 50 to 60% of it is not even seen. It's covered up by the armor pieces. But when you have photo references is all you have to show somebody, they look at it and turn around and walk away. Finally, there's someone that's been found recently in the past maybe year and a half, 2 years, over in Germany who seems to be doing a nice job. At least the person that's making them is making it consistent. Learning curve on the first one, second one a little bit better, third one looked great. I've only seen pictures of, I've only seen pictures of 3 of them, and they were critiqued, not by me, by the person that bought them, and they are happy. If it looks good on camera, and the person that owns it likes it, the general public will never know the difference, as long as they're not tripping and falling over themselves.
Yeah, I had I'm sorry.
I just started to say that originally, you know, my initial concept sketch did not have any of that ribbing, so you can't blame me for that. It was basically just a black bodysuit of some sort, you know, or actually in my original concept it was a dark green, be like a very dark forest green. And the armor itself would have been actually just about this color, but much darker. So I thought that these stormtroopers, these Cylons, would be very dark overall. But Glenn Larson thought that they should be chrome for some reason. And so I heard about that and came up with that final concept sketch as a chrome body. So, you know, something else that's a detail on this suit is this mouthpiece. You know, Glenn Larson originally said that he wanted the helmet to have a skull-like appearance. And so my thought was, if you came up with a snarl like that, this part would actually curve down more. And it's in my sketch. You know, if you run into me at my table out downstairs, I have prints of those available, and you can see the difference between that and this. The modelers actually came out with this, which is more like Darth Vader, and that's where some of the lawsuit happened between Universal and Lucasfilm, because this had a very Darth Vader look to them. This step-down mouthpiece, as I said in my slideshow, is actually a carryover from the original Imperious Leader mouthpiece. Had some step-down parts in his mouth before the afro, and that was also in the Cylon fighter cockpit. It was a stepped-up cockpit. So whenever I design things, I try to look for connections, visual, usually subliminal connections between components, so that there's, if you don't see the unity, you feel the unity. It feels better. And you'll notice that this mouthpiece, the way it comes up and around with the step down, is also repeated in the chest, so that there's the top of the helmet and then the chest, so it all kind of fits together like that. And of course, they didn't color it any differently. I mean, they chromed over that whole chest piece, but that's the idea behind the way these look.
So I actually have a question. You know, you being the designer, right? You've expressed the fact that, you know, as a designer, things change in production, whether you like it or not. And that's, you know, that's what happened. And so the Cylons became what they are. How do you feel when you see people walking around and, like the costumers, you know, how does that make you feel to see, no matter what the costume is, that's kind of a piece of you walking around? And does that make you feel proud, or are you annoyed?
No, I'm not annoyed. It's really fun to see these guys walking around, and it's wonderful that people take the time and the effort to, and the sweat and blood and tears to put these together. So I appreciate it all. What I get a real kick out of is when they're getting pictures of each other. I like standing next to them. They don't know who I am. So I get a real kick out of that. And then maybe later on they'll go, "Oh my gosh, look who's in our picture."
Photo ball.
I don't care. I think it's so much fun because I'm a very stealthy guy, you know.
I know exactly what he means. I coerced him over to the Enterprise bridge to take his picture. 15 people standing around had no idea who he was.
Wow.
So much fun.
Quick
Some of them
trivia.
are in BSG costumes too, huh?
I'm sorry?
Some of them are also Battlestar Galactica costumes too, huh?
They are. I didn't design those. Jean-Pierre Doliac designed those.
So you really are just the Cylon model of the ships?
One more time.
You designed the Cylons and the starships?
No, I did not do the starships, just the Cylons. I did a little ship in the Ragtag Fleet, but that was the only ship I ever designed. I provided other designs, but they didn't use them.
Sorry, was that the triangle ship?
Oh, you weren't here. You should have got the actual.
And quick trivia, what color is the Cylon undersuit? Black?
Purple.
Purple? I'm looking at this tablecloth, and as a costumer, I'm always looking for that right material, and I'm really wanting just to rip this tablecloth. Why? Because the original suit is remarkably close to this color.
It's very close,
Very
yes.
close. Very
It's
close.
the
The
completely
black
wrong
purple for the
material.
gold and copper. Now, does anybody know why this one's copper?
That looked great.
Ice Station Zero, they had a gold.
It's a ranking system.
Yeah.
Yes. They tried originally in the TV movie Saga of Star World with ranking on the chest and on the throat plate, but it ended up being on the cutting room floor. But it was a promotional photo that they used. Nobody ever asked about it. The footage never.
Is that crest or something? What kind of gold?
No, this is a problem. That
Well, actually, I
originally-
think the chroming was more of a mistake. They just wanted a command Centurion and a, Centurion. And I guess through production, they kind of had this copper look, and then they also had the gold one originally, but they were the same guy.
Later on, they realized that if they used a different type of plastic, that kind of like had a spider webbing inside of it. When they chromed it, it didn't reflect as badly as an original. It was like going in to take a picture of somebody with 10,000 mirrors looking at you. The flash just went everywhere. The lens flare, yeah. J.J. Abrams special.
I mean, the guy who did the chroming on this stuff intentionally muted it down on purpose. You know, he could do it much more sparkly, but you have to think about it. And, the reason why you guys are here at a convention is, you see these people at conventions, and you have to think about, do I want it screen accurate, or am I doing a costume that's wearable and friendly to take pictures of and stuff? So it all depends on what direction and what you want to use it for.
Well, there's a similar story about the comm badge. The ones on set were wood because they had to cut down the reflection. They couldn't use metal.
You mean for next generation?
Yes, next generation.
Well, they're actually they were castings, not actual wood, but it was a casting that I think they'd used for furniture. I don't know the exact material, but yeah, they weren't wood, but they were pretty dull. I mean, they were painted. They're various colors, gold and kind of like an aluminum, like a brushed aluminum. But yeah, you couldn't have anything sparkling on the chest.
But isn't that part of the magic of the watching TV is buying into it so much, and when you actually see the real thing, you're like, wow, that's a big pile of crap. My God. Actually, when I saw his Cylon setup, I was like, that's a good-looking crap. That was one of those impressive costumes. But a lot of times you go and see some of the old Star Wars stuff, if you've seen any original piece, and you're like, wow, that looks a lot better on screen. But again, it's for the picture, it's for the job that they did it.
It served its purpose for filming. What happens after it, until they need it again, they don't really care. It's got a scratch and dent. Who cares? We're done filming with it. Just toss it off to the side and do whatever.
More imagination kind of fills in the gap.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's some people that are purist about costume collecting, regardless of the condition it is in. They leave it that way. That's the way it was on film. Not necessarily, though. It could have been damaged in storage. And then there's others that, as soon as they get something, it's 100% restoration back to screen used original. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Who do you talk to? What do you want to know about a prop?
Hollywood is so weird with their props. There was a time when I was working on Tron briefly. I would take lunch breaks and walk the back lot just for fun, so I could see where they filmed Zorro and eventually Pete's Dragon and all that fun stuff in the back lot. And they had like a Main Street set, but it was like an old Western town. And I'm walking along, and you look in the windows, and it's like, well, there's nothing in there. It's kind of interesting because it's not needed, so it's just empty. Or